And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Xbox Lunch Break Special. I'm your host, Mr. BoomStick XL. And ladies and gentlemen, we have an absolutely outstanding show for you here today on, well, happy Memorial Day to all of our veterans who are current, former, and potentially in the future. It is definitely a day of remembrance, and you should, if you do know anybody in the military, you should thank them for your freedom, because without them, we wouldn't have that. But Fuzzy Belvedere, good afternoon, kind sir. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Glad to be here with you once again. And yeah, Xbox has been doing a lot of stuff as far as whether it's Game Pass or stuff we got to look forward to next month and possible hardware before the end of the year. But man,
Yeah.
having a good time. Glad to be here. Got some interesting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, so obviously, folks, you saw that we had to pull an audible. There was a unsubstantiated report that there was a mystery recording of President of SIE Hiroki Totoki saying that PlayStation gamers would have to get used to the idea that they would be going multi-plat. Obviously, that's not true. We did not have anybody report on it. I did see King David talk about it. I did see Post Up make a post regarding it, and obviously it's unsubstantiated. So obviously we're gonna move off of that subject. We have many other topics to get into that are real, that do have substance, that do have a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak. Will PlayStation go third party? That's an interesting thought and theory. I would imagine that it's going to be sooner than later. How quickly they get to PC, they're there. There's usually like a 6-month gap or an 8-month gap or even a 9-month gap, even sometimes a year between releases. I don't know if they can actually afford to do that any further. I don't think that the move to Xbox is something that's going to happen this year. But at some point, PlayStation is going to have to make a decision on whether or not people on PlayStation and on PC are buying enough of their software. I don't think that they are, but only time will tell. But Fuzzy Belvedere, I want to get into a post to open up today's show from Clobriel. Now, Clobriel, if you don't know who he is a big member of the Xbox community. He is a big voice within the ranks of, the socials. Specifically, I follow him and he follows me on X. And he put out a post. And, you talked about Xbox being in the positive conversation recently. And I would say that's been going on all of 2025. It started in January with the Direct. It then continued with the release of Avowed in February. And every month to where we are right now, we're at the tail end of May. We haven't even gotten to the halfway mark of the year. And Xbox, when you talk about Xbox Game Pass, you talk about the future of the brand, Xbox first party, there really isn't any negative things to say. Now, granted, I understand that, the third party move still, like I said earlier, it soured a lot of people, Fuzzy, and I understand it. Again, I made a post about it, and some guy, tried to, at me, if you will, about me, I'm glad that you like their new direction. And let's be clear, folks. I never said I liked it. I've come to accept it. There's a tremendous difference. If I was running Xbox, I don't know if I would have done that. But you got to admit they're making money, and not that it matters to me because they're not filling my coffers and they're certainly not paying your mortgage, Fuzzy. But the truth of the matter is that what happens with, profits come bigger investments. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because Xbox Game Pass ultimately is an investment that Xbox continues to pour games into. So let's start off with this post from Clobriel. And it says basically Xbox Game Pass continues strong. So this is just the end of the month through what we know is coming so far for June. And I'm going to read the list, folks. Metaphor ReFantazio is launching on the 29th of May. That was one of last year's biggest RPGs, and it is a phenomenal game. Another Atlas joint that a lot of people really enjoyed, and I would imagine that this is going to have a running sequel, trilogy, maybe even just continue on like the Persona games. Then you had the shock and awe that happened last week, Fuzzy. Warhammer 40K, the Space Marine Master Crafted Edition. And what's interesting, and I checked up until 12:06 on today's date, which is May 26th, it's still only on Xbox and PC. There is no scheduled PlayStation 5 version of this game. I don't know why. There's been no talk about how this happened. But again, it happened literally the same day that the FTC, pulled their case against Xbox and ABK. And you have the alters. Now, I don't know so much about this game if it's for me, but I know a lot of people are excited. I saw a post from Paris Lilly talking about this game. He was very excited for it, which, again, he's an excitable kind of a dude, and he likes good games. And the way he was talking about it sounded it sounded like I have to check it out, right? FBC Firebreak is also launching into Game Pass on the 17th. And you also have now Lost in Random, the Eternal Dice, also on the 17th. And on the 19th, I think we saw this last year. It's called Rematch. Now, Rematch is a football game, but not, the NFL football, the soccer football. And again, in Game Pass day and date. You know why this is a very interesting conversation to have here today, Buzzy Belvedere, is because not only are they already stacked for the month of June, this is before any conversation comes the way of the showcase, which is happening on the 8th. Right now, again, are there going to be any Game Pass announcements for June at the showcase? Well, that's obviously we're going to have to wait and find out, because so far this is what we got. But you do have to admit, Fuzzy, that the explosion of games in Xbox Game Pass in 2025 has been nothing short. I want to say that so far, it's probably the biggest year the service has ever had. Now, again, obviously, if you have a better thought and theory, drop it into the chat and we'll discuss it. But I gotta be honest with you, Fuzzy. This is only at the halfway mark.
Yeah,
and we still have 6 full months of releases, which we know that Gears of War Reloaded is in there. The next Call of Duty, whatever that's going to be, which again, it's the rumors that it's going to be Black Ops 7, which is a sequel to Black Ops 2, right? You also have the Outer Worlds 2. What else could they be releasing? Well, I would imagine there could be a bunch of other real big surprises in there. Fuzzy, I want to get your thoughts on the posting from Clobreel regarding there's basically the highlight of what Xbox Game Pass has coming, and of course, keeping into the conversation what they've already done, dude. Like it's just crazy.
Yeah, like each month Game Pass has been giving us some pretty decent bangers, not just first party, but also day and date third party, as well as some of the classics that, like we just had that whole 50 classics from Activision drop in there. Plus we're getting, whatever they unveil at the June showcase. But each month there's been at least 2 or 3 titles that I've been looking forward to playing that, some of the others kind of fall to the wayside as far as the backlog is concerned. But like we just had, Expedition 33, we just had Doom. Not too long ago, we had Avowed. And we're getting a lot of other
Oblivion.
Oh yeah, and Oblivion as well. And we're going to get was it Ninja Gaiden later this year, Outer Worlds later this year. We got the Gears Reloaded coming later this year. So they've been hitting us with remasters, new titles, day and date titles from third parties. Some of the most requested games from like the previous months or earlier this year, like with Metaphor coming next month. Like it's a nonstop, bombardment of games, which, going back to the old saying, everybody used to say Xbox has no games. It's quite the opposite this go around. So much to the point where I joke about that, they have to share some of the games that they have at this point. But yeah, I've been looking forward to Alters for a while. It has that weird sci-fi with cloning of yourself and stuff, where I guess each one of your clones will have some of your memories and some other special abilities or special talents that will be pertinent to your spaceship. But yeah, it's been nonstop games after games after games, and that even goes for some of the indie games. Like was it Blueprints not too long ago launched into the service? Uh, there's just been a plethora of games this entire year, and if this June announcement or the June announcement as far as the games coming next month and everything, or any indication, I think we'll have a nice, well-rounded year end with what they show at the June showcase, filling out some of the in-between months. Whether you're looking forward to this year's Call of Duty or even next year's Call of Duty, I'm pretty sure we'll get to see more info on that, as well as all of the first-party stuff. Like we've already had Ninja Theory hinting on, I guess, something to show that they'll have at the showcase, since they're doing like their internal updates or whatever, as far as showing the staff or the team where they're at on certain projects and stuff. So it's going to be pretty interesting showcase. But June is already loaded. May has been loaded. April's been loaded. March has been loaded. I think about the only month that wasn't loaded was January, but I think a lot of people were still playing, Indiana Jones at that point. So
yeah,
you kind of had something to fall back on, and whatever else you may have gotten under the Christmas tree or the gift cards and stuff that you may have purchased some other games throughout the year. So yeah, it's been a pretty stacked year overall. But hey, June is no reason to slow down. So they decided to put Metaphor in there, and it's great to see that partnership that everybody kind of downplayed between Sega and Xbox is actually paying dividends. Like a lot of people were like, "Oh, that super game, it means nothing." And ever since then, we've been getting things like, was it the 2 Hospital or the museum thing, as well as a lot of other Sega related titles. Some of their other studios that are falling under their heading and stuff like that have been coming into the service day and date, as well as some of their titles coming into the service thereafter. We got Persona, which people I think may have forgotten, which stands a chance of seeing maybe Persona 6 unveiled at the showcase, but we'll see. But we also had all the Yakuzas come to the service and stuff like that. So it's been a pretty busy year. Like we thought 2023 was a pretty decent year. 2024 was an even better year, and 2025 has already outdone it. And we're not truly at the halfway mark. And 2026 is, with some of the games that have been pushed into that year frame, it's already seeming like it's going to be a pretty stacked year to begin with. And that's not even including all the third party stuff that we know is coming. So, man, it's been overwhelming. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we got to, like when you take a step back and, you talk about the value proposition, this could not have come at a better time for gamers, right? And I say that because obviously there's going to be a conversation to be had when all games go to $80. Like right now, it's certain games on Switch too. Xbox has already announced their games are going to be going up in price. I mean, PlayStation's going to get there at some point. When, we don't know. I would imagine that you're going to see the next Madden, for instance, which is only going to be next generation only for the first time. That's probably going to be an $80 game because everyone is going to be buying it. And there's going to be a lot of people moving from PS4 and PS4 Pros and Xbox One S and X's to, of course, the newer hardware. And when people move, people are going to be met with higher prices. So consoles are going to be higher. And I know that there's a running rumor that VGC posted about Sony doing like a $50 price reduction that has not been official yet. It'd be big for Sony. I mean, they're going to sell a whole bunch of consoles if they do. But again, we'll see whether or not that happens. Or, of course, they raise the price like everyone else because there's still stuff going on around the world that requires this price increase, which I am never in favor of. But, just getting back to the games factor, folks, this is such an interesting place where we find ourselves. And I know that we're joking, like there are real world problems. And most people you talk to on the socials, Fuzzy, have to go right back to, look, I'm going to be honest with you. There's just too many games. Yeah. And that is a magnificent problem to have. and why we continue to talk about Xbox Game Pass, because I know there's going to be some people in the chat like, my God, these guys are talking about Game Pass again. Well, you should be talking about it. And I'll say this again, folks, I don't get a dime from Xbox to tell you about Game Pass. I know that as a retiree who has a pension that's magnificent but has a ceiling, Game Pass is great. I want to get your thoughts on that for a second, because the value proposition is something to be had. And again, you got to remember, this is coming off a year. Oh, I say a year. The first 5 months of 2025 that has been ridiculous. And also, again, we're coming up on June's showcase, which we are going to get the rest of the roadmap for 2025, which is expected to be bombastic at least, not even at best, at least bombastic, just based on some of the first party stuff. And then the third party stuff, again, why Game Pass? Well, if you're a developer, you're a publisher, whether you be big or small, who gets the most conversation every month there's a game put into the service? It's not Nintendo's service. It's not PlayStation service. It's everyone is talking about Xbox Game Pass. And if your game is put into this service, people are likely to download and play. You are also likely to get a bag of money from Xbox, right? And obviously, there's no guarantee that you're going to sell your game on whatever, even if you go multi-plat. Let's say, for instance, you're here, there, and everywhere. That's great, but you're battling hundreds, if not thousands, of other games. So when you go into Xbox Game Pass, folks, you're not just winning as a consumer, you're winning as a dev, because you don't have to fight against potentially hundreds of other games for someone to be like, oh, look, this game looks interesting. Let's get your thoughts on that, man.
Well, the big thing on the value, especially with the consideration that some titles will go to $80, like if you're the type of person that only buys 2 or 3 titles, then yeah, maybe it's not the best value for you. If you're only playing Madden, if you're only playing COD, or maybe both of those, then you might be better off just buying those 2 games. But when you look at like if the person that would buy 3 or 4 games is looking at spending over the year versus what will be in the service, or at least on the EA titles, having early access to, already having, COD come into the service, no additional charge, plus the first party stuff from Xbox. I think the value speaks for itself, where if you're a gamer that doesn't quite have the endless budget or the bottomless pockets to buy all the games as soon as they come out, I think, Game Pass is going to be the way to go. But you could also wait for sales. But then again, on the flip side of things, this is why I use Game Pass more so than anything. I don't have to pay for the game when it launches. I can get it on sale later, but I get to play it the day it comes out. Or for a few bucks more, doing the upgrade, I have the early access to it. So you don't have to be outside the conversation of what the latest or dropped games are from Xbox. And in a lot of cases, some of the smaller third parties, which from the dev standpoint, the third parties are looking at, like Capcom, for example, Path of the Goddess. That was one of those games where they weren't quite sure how well it would do. It didn't do quite as well as maybe they had hoped, but I'm pretty sure they made a lot of their initial investment back by being in Game Pass and being on other platforms at the same time. Same thing with their Dino Crisis like game that they had. But there are other titles that go in there, get the bag of money from Microsoft. We get to play it in Game Pass. It still gets to sell well on other platforms, whether it's PC or other consoles, like Expedition 33. And that dev, the main thing that they credit with Game Pass or Xbox in general is just being part of the dev direct. Mm-hmm. It got to be in place or in the same conversation with games like Doom. And that being a AAA, multi-platform title, that's going to have its own draw, but also being in that same showcase or in that same spotlight, it brings more attention to them. So from the dev standpoint, it's almost like, I wouldn't say free marketing, but it is a better way of marketing. You have your normal advertising dollars, but you also have a bigger spread of word of mouth of the game, because you have more players that may not have been able to try it or may have been on the fence. Now they get to try it because it's part of their subscription service. And if they're, praising it to the heavens, then it's going to definitely carry over to other platforms. And more people are going to want to know, well, what was this game like? Or why is everybody talking about this particular game? But on the same, standpoint, if the game isn't that great, it could backfire. But even games that have had like a rocky road, like what was it, Outriders, it had a lot of buzz about it. Whether it was the dev that dropped the ball or Square with the financing and not allowing them to do the updates on a timely manner, that may have hurt things. But I think in the grand scheme of things, People Can Fly will be better off in the long term, possibly, one, separating themselves from Square, and two, knowing that, something in Game Pass will get them, with them being self-published, hopefully at that point, a lot more of their revenue back in their own pocket, as opposed to waiting for Square to kind of do a third-party payment thing for them. But yeah, Game Pass in general, great value for consumers that are on a budget, or even if you're not on a budget, aren't sure of a game but want to try it out. And once you find that if you like that game, you can go ahead and buy it at a discount. That's what I wind up doing most of the time. When it comes to just gaming in general, not everybody is able to get every platform, but you're able to get like Game Pass on your TV or your existing PC or laptop or tablet by subscribing to Ultimate. You'll still be able to have access to those games, be it by streaming, but there's still access. And if you're on PC, pretty much PC Game Pass is a nice alternative. Not saying that, it's
certainly
miles
cheaper
above Steam, but it's definitely a cheaper approach where you may not get the full library that you see on Steam, but you do get a lot of gems that Steam has as well, and you're able to get them in that service. So if you're a PC player and you don't mind having additional launchers, which, I'm pretty sure there's quite a few people that have the Epic launcher and just build up that library and maybe not necessarily purchase.
You mean the free game library?
Yeah, that's another nice alternative. As far as for being on a budget, you have access to a lot of the games that might not be given free on Epic, but you see a lot of people buzzing about on Steam, and you're in a subscription service to be able to have access to it without shelling out the full price at launch. And you can always pick it up on sale at a later date. So, it's a win-win all around for gamers as well as devs for the most part. And I can't be happier for it that they have something like this right now. So,
yeah, again, it's a service that you can subscribe to or not. Obviously, it's getting a little bit harder to get those $10 cards versus the regular price cards. It was that Microsoft's plan all along. Maybe, you know what I'm saying? They get you into the door, and once you're here, you never leave, right? We've known some people to leave for obvious reasons. Some people are just disenchanted with the brand. People were soured by the third party marketing thing that they're doing. I get all of that. I just think that, again, this is just me talking out loud. I don't know how you, as a consumer, not a gamer, not a PlayStation guy or gal or otherwise, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, PC. I find it just hard to honestly understand how you don't look at Xbox Game Pass and think that there isn't value enough there to be a part of the service. Now, granted, is it big enough, Fuzzy, to get someone to switch sides? I don't know. Some people buy a PlayStation for The Last of Us and God of War and Horizon. And if you do, those are all great games. So you're going to enjoy yourself. Now they have Xbox putting a ton of games on there. So maybe you don't need to move, and no one's suggesting that you should. But if you don't mind buying the games, then you just buy the games. Again, hard to argue why that if you are a PlayStation gamer, and we know who we're talking about, who has the accessibility to a rig, why you wouldn't have Xbox Game Pass for PC, because then you've officially won, at least in my opinion. You got your PlayStation, you're enjoying your console of choice, and of course you are then using your rig that you told us you spent $5,000 on, and you're getting Xbox Game Pass, and you're doing even better because it's cheaper on PC Game Pass than it is on console. So you're not paying for online, and you're paying a cheaper price, which is great, right? So it's a double win for you. And I see people arguing that. As a matter of fact, I saw a posting in here. Who was it? It was Nino Vestic, our generous friend, all the way from Hawaii. He says this, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a running conversation to be had. It's funny how people think you can't buy games if you use Game Pass. Clowns. And that's the other thing. You can buy every game that's on Xbox Game Pass at a discount. So if you are into, quote unquote, owning your games, you can own your games. If there's a game, like for instance, did I absolutely need to buy Expedition 33 at Full Boat? I did not. Did I? Yes, I did. I made a conscious choice to support the dev because they're a small indie team. I bought the game. I didn't have to because it was in the service. I could have simply just paid the $10 to get the upgrade and be done with it. But I wanted to buy the rather than $49, I bought the $60 edition because I get so much value in Game Pass. Me helping out a dev, at least in my opinion, is well worth the money, right? So that's a me choice. Did you have to do that? No, you can simply just play through your service, and you're not doing anything wrong. You are paying for your service like you do for HBO Max or Peacock or Amazon Prime, whatever your service of choice is. You're paying for that service. So when you watch a movie that was in theaters 45 days ago, do you feel bad that you didn't give that money, your ticket price, to the movie studio? You shouldn't. You're paying for a service. But shout out to Nino Vestic for the great point out. And look, folks, again, I'm not going to tell you to spend your money, but I find it, again, very disingenuous if you're going to turn around and come into this chat and try and tell us that there's not enough value there for you, but you'd rather go and buy the games. Okay, I mean, if you got money like that, good for you, man. I'm not a hater. I'm a congratulator. So if you got the spendable cash like that, good on you. But look, I want to get into topic number 2. This is going to trigger some people, folks. So get ready. When you talk about PlayStation right now, right? There's not a lot of positive talk. There's just not. So I want to throw up a Prophet NYC picture that he posted on Twitter that really is the conversation with PlayStation right now. So bear with me for a second. I have it queued and ready to go. So get ready, folks. If you are a Sony guy or gal, you're going to get triggered. And I'm not doing this for console war. I'm doing this for an absolute purpose in the conversation that we're about to have. So PlayStation, right, is a corporation that to some gamers you're not allowed to question what PlayStation is doing, Fuzzy Belvedere. We see, like we just saw moments ago, and we continue to see in an Xbox conversation chat that Xbox is shit, right? Xbox is a brand that nobody wants. They can't sell consoles. We've heard welfare pass, right? We heard people, Xbox players don't buy games. They rent them. We've heard all the conversation. When Phil makes a decision, it's the end of the brand. Xbox is dying. But whenever PlayStation does something, anytime anyone, and I don't mean just Xbox folks, I mean like anyone questions their methods, what they're doing, why they're doing it, it's shut up, sit down, it's PlayStation. They could do what they want. They're market leader. Well, folks, I'm going to show you a picture right now that is and what PlayStation is. Check this out. Right there, folks. This is what PlayStation in 2025 is right now. It's the only conversation that if I put it this way, if you're a PlayStation fan, you should be concerned. This is what PlayStation is in front of you, folks. Concord failed. Marathon, potential failure. Fail games, I said fail games. I didn't mean that, folks. That was an accident. Fair games is probably going to fail. I didn't mean fail games, but it works. Look, the reason why I bring this up is we got a story here from GameRank.com. It's posted by Motion Baggery. Now, this was posted. When was this? Posted 1 day ago. The lead title says, "Rumor: Sony has no marketing plans for Marathon next quarter." And we saw this happen. This was posted on Friday by several of the big sites, where it appears that Sony Interactive Entertainment, SIE for short, has pulled all of the marketing dollars for Marathon in the next quarter when it's supposed to release. Obviously, there's been a significant amount of bad press for this game. And you got to remember, folks, this is a game from Bungie, who is probably one of the best FPS gunplay shooters in the business. Now, if you don't like Destiny or Destiny 2, I understand it. I'm not going to fight you on it. But from my point of view, when I did play Destiny, and I played Destiny 1 and 2 a lot. Now, I haven't played in many, many years because, again, it's just one of those games that just sucks you in. That's all you play. I ain't about that life. I do that for Call of Duty, for Halo, and a few others. I can't add another one to the ranks. It's just too much. And of course, Division is coming back in a big way with their update. So I'm going to be back in Division with my brother and our old crew. But Marathon is, I think, walking a razor's edge of disaster. Fuzzy Belvedere. Okay. When you hear that more than 2, potentially 3, even more so than that, artists have come forward and said that their artwork was stolen. This is not the first time for Bungie. This is probably the 5th or 6th time for Bungie. And at this point, it's disgusting, right? Like at what point does someone, because I saw a lot of people trying to defend the art director. Well, he gets paid the big bucks, right? He's the art director. You have to make sure that your crew is actually doing what they're supposed to do. This is a corporation, and it's a corporation, part of a bigger corporation in Sony. So you got to make sure that whatever they're doing it the right way, right? Well, that wasn't so much the case. Now, this is coming off of a alpha that a lot of people walked away unenthused, right? And there are other games out there like Arc Raiders that have stolen the conversation zeitgeist. So obviously, Bungie and Marathon find themselves in a bit of a pickle. And then this story happens late Friday afternoon, where you start hearing that the actual marketing budget has been pulled from this game, which suggests that it's going to be delayed. And that's not a surprise, considering that you've seen many people calling for this game's delay, right? Obviously, we heard Paris Lilly talk about it. We heard a couple of the big journos talk about it. Paul Tassi, more specifically, did not 1 but 2 articles talking about about what's going on with Marathon. And then, of course, we talk about Fair Games, and Fair Games is another incredible, I think, F up from Sony. This was a studio that was created by Jade Raidman, who left she's gone. Her studio is still behind, but the studio was purchased by Sony. That game had a very, very lackluster showing when it showed its CG trailer. And we've had some people talk about it, saying that it's basically a clone or a ripoff of
Payday 3,
Fortnite and Division, and it's clunky. Man, that's not really that good. So those 3 games that I threw up on your screen earlier is what PlayStation is right now. This isn't console war. This is put on the big boy pants, ladies and gentlemen, and have an adult conversation. I don't know how you personally could be a diehard Sony fan, look at this, what we just put up on the screen, and be like, yeah, no, everything's good. Don't worry about them. They're fine. Let's get your thoughts on the potential delay of Marathon. Do you think that this is basically a done deal?
I think the delay is definite. I see. I've made some responses on Twitter to people that were asking, well, what would you have Sony do? And I always thought Marathon was probably going to be a problem if it didn't have some sort of PVE component to it. Even if that PVE component is just co-op, I think that allows you more wiggle room for a player base coming off of Destiny. If you're going to eventually cease or wind down the support for Destiny 2, it would make sense to have some sort of PVE co-op experience, something similar, maybe not a direct ripoff of Helldivers 2, but some component to that in Marathon, to me, would make the most sense. Because let's be clear, when it comes to extraction shooters, most of them have something else to cover them to keep the players interested. Now, the exception to the rule being Escape from Tarkov, although they finally did their own, single player or offline mode that you can do, which people have been doing mods to do that. You could also do the offline stuff for a while, but they actually dedicated, more effort into making that single player part, substantial. They also made the arena, which was another thing that, kind of fills in for the battle royale aspect of things. But extraction shooters are, I won't say they're niche, but they are a smaller segment. Even if you look at the Division, which I still consider more of the original extraction shooter, although it didn't have as punishing of a playthrough or play as Tarkov. Although, let's say Tarkov started earlier, but as far as when it came to being a polished release, Division reached that goal sooner in comparison. But they always had the PVE aspect. It was always meant to be a co-op experience, and you had the basically the betrayal aspect was what was for the Dark Zone as far as the extraction shooter point. But you didn't have the punishing factor of losing all of your gear, just the gear that you acquired while you're in that zone type of thing. But with Marathon not having like a balance between that or some other component to kind of draw in the Destiny 2 crowd, I always felt it. I won't say it was doomed from start, but it either needed that to survive or it was going to be a 2-year flash in the pan kind of thing. And as far as Sony right now, they had what would have been two, I would say, far-reaching hits as opposed to what Marathon could possibly do. Like if you look at the Great Web, I think it was what it was codenamed for the Spider-Man multiplayer game, or even if you look at factions, if they had, like, I still think if they just release whatever they have now in like an early access form and allow the community to kind of direct them and as far as the progress of the game and stuff, I think they would be much better off. Because look at how well the day before was wish listed and talked about until the whole behind the scenes story of that dev team being kind of nefarious as far as their goals with free employees or unpaid employees and reused assets and such. But imagine the Division meets The Last of Us, and that I think would be a longer lasting game for a Sony games as a service type of game. The other thing, they still have their current games as a service, which they don't really lean on that games as a service aspect with Gran Turismo 7 or even MLB, but those are still kind of a games as a service, but people don't really look at them that way. But Gran Turismo needs more tracks on a more frequent basis. They release cars, but they're usually only about 4 in a month, as opposed to like something like with Horizon and stuff like that. They usually have that amount each week. Now, if you look at the grand scheme of things, some of those cars are re-released into the game because of the way the seasons and the way the playlists work. But overall, you're looking at 900 cars compared to, I think GT7 is now in the 500 range, and the game is a couple of years old. So you would think having more cars and even having more tracks would be in their best interest, or have a mode that you can now build in Horizon, a no hesi mode where you're basically dodging in and out of traffic, which they already have the Tokyo racetrack or the Tokyo highway racetrack. They could just make that mode, and I think that would draw more attention back into the game. But another thing that looking at PlayStation when it comes to their games as a service. There's still a Horizon game that I think leaked some images that look more like a Fortnite type of game, but
Yeah, the original leak of it, it very much looked like they took exactly what Fortnite does with the boxy looking type of characters, and they just kind of slapsticked it on to Horizon. You know what? You know what's interesting? I want to run these numbers by you because you made mention of Gran Turismo 7, and you said they semi lean on these games as a service.
Yeah.
And this is why you know that there is something called mismanagement going on at Sony Interactive Entertainment, specifically PlayStation. Here's why. So I did a general search to see how many copies of Gran Turismo sold. Folks, I'm here to tell you, I was blown away. Nearly 15 million copies of this game, and I'm one of them. I bought it. I don't like it. I'm gonna be honest with you. I bought it for my nephew because he saw the movie and he wanted the game, and so he comes over, he plays it. Awesome, right? That's exactly what Sony would want. They got me to buy the game. Now I didn't buy it at full boat. I got it used, but it's still. But 15 million copies of a game of and listen, you play it, you very much enjoy it. Now, does it need some tweaking? Does it need some more tracks and more? Absolutely needs all those things.
Yeah.
But it's a serviceable game. You very much enjoy your time playing it. My nephew Tyler loves playing it. Awesome. Why don't they actually work with what they have and double down on what's working instead of going again? That picture I showed you earlier, folks, I'm sure someone's going to see that and they're going to be triggered. But don't get triggered at me. Get triggered at whoever's running PlayStation right now, because ultimately those three games are the face of the franchise right now, and it's not good. And I don't know when people are going to start talking about Ghosts of Yotai or something else, because those are the three games that are taking up the narrative. So again, just going back to Gran Turismo and what you were saying, why don't they double down on something that's working, Fuzzy?
That's a great question. I wish I had the answer on that. Like, they have the IP that they can utilize in that fashion for reoccurring revenue each month with active players, whether they're buying skins or tracks or cars or what have you. They have all of the building blocks for that. And when I was talking about for Horizon, when it comes to like the Horizon Zero and Horizon Forbidden West genre, they could easily turn that into a Monster Hunter game. And we saw how big Monster Hunter was this year. Not saying they have to copy like for like as far as Monster Hunter, but I think that approach, as opposed to a battle royale where it's, I guess, each one of the tribes against each other kind of thing, I think you would be better off using that more realistic visuals as opposed to a Fortnite visual and making it a Monster Hunter game against I always refer to them as Dino bots, but I think that would go a lot further as far as for the Sony player base for a multiplayer game where you're buying different skins for the different tribes or you're incorporating other Sony IP into that. It just seems to me that would make the most sense. But instead, they choose to go with something that's more of a Payday knockoff, or, Marathon being this extraction shooter that has just had a bumpy road ever since they've announced it. It seems like one thing after the other that either Bungie hasn't quite finalized or figured out, or they're just trying to rush this to the market kind of thing, or maybe Sony's forcing the issue considering how much they've invested in Bungie and how much time they've spent on this, and the fact that it's taken away from Destiny, which should be a nice reoccurring revenue or breadwinner for them, but you barely see that in the top 15 on Sony's PlayStation charts. So it's got to be hurting them in some form or way, that knowing that they paid all this money for Bungie and they're not charting as well as something more recent coming from their competitor like Forza Horizon, or even like Sea of Thieves and stuff. So it's like I wonder how much longer Herman Hulse is going to be there, not calling for his head in any way, shape, or form, but it just feels like that's the side of Sony that's kind of lacking. the guy that got the promotion, I forget what his name is, as far as the actual president of PlayStation, but when it comes to selling hardware, they're doing a bang up job as far as that's concerned. But when it comes to selling software, as far as their first party stuff or their partnered second party / first party stuff, like your Stellar Blade, which 1 million copies for that type of title seems extremely low. We'll see how well it does on PC. I expect it to do double those numbers on PC, especially considering mods being an option. But all things aside, it just feels like they're almost doing like Ubisoft, where they focus on the wrong, next big thing, or they already have something that could fit that next big thing, but they choose to ignore that and focus on, like Skull and Bones, which Skull and Bones, if it had just been the ship battle aspect of things, would have probably, been launched 5 years ago and it probably been a hit 5 years ago. But it's now, it's not quite what the people want, and they're still adjusting it and trying to make it more to what the fan base wants. But they spent so much development time and so much development resources in that regard that they'll never recoup it. And that's the same thing with Concord. Yep. The cost of the studio, the cost of the development time. With Haven and Fair Games, it was the cost of the studio and the cost of this development time. If that game winds up getting canceled, or if they have to do a complete reboot and restart, that's a lot of wasted revenue. Now, I'm sure people will say, well, Xbox has their instances of that.
Sure.
Okay, so every while, they had to go through a reboot, but they at least had something like Sea of Thieves with that reoccurring revenue to kind of cover their butts in that regard. Yeah. So that's the thing that Sony's kind of lacking with the reoccurring revenue, or having its own, title where it can collect 100% of the revenue when it comes to this games as a service or monthly reoccurring purchases of season passes or battle passes or skins and things like that. I mean, it's great making the 30% off of the other people's stuff, but making 100% is what they want. And that's why they had that initiative to make so many games as a service. And now they've cut it down to like the bare bones, where even the ones that had the most successful games as a service are now trying to do stuff on their own at this point, because for whatever reason, maybe Sony pissed them off, or maybe they just feel that they will be better trying their hand at doing it on their own, so they get 100% of the revenue as opposed to sharing revenue with Sony, even though Sony might be footing the bill for the development. But I don't know. They're going to have to figure out something on games as a service. I mean, it's great that they can always rely on their single-player games, but when their single-player games stop selling and they have to remaster them to resell them to you again, I think that's where people need to kind of take a step back and say, hey, we either want new IP or new sequels, as opposed to the same sequel being rehashed 3 and 4 times between 2 generations. So that's all I got.
No, I mean, it's a great point of view. Their budgets are expensive because they're movie-like games, right? The quality, again, maybe the characters themselves aren't for you. Maybe the IP isn't what is one of your favorites. But you do got to admit that Sony's games are fantastic to look at. They are movie-like experiences. And that movie-like experience comes with an expense. And that's why usually what happens is that when the developer, Naughty Dog, for instance, is done doing the game, it's then sent to another studio, the secret studio that Sony has, that makes it movie-like, that makes it look like a film. All right, that's extra development. Right now, and again, this is why I think Sony finds themselves in a bit of a tailspin, is the 3 games that we talked about. Fair Games is in uncharted waters. Marathon potentially is getting delayed to get a revamp. And what does that revamp look like? I honestly don't know. I didn't play the game, and extraction shooters aren't my thing. And obviously Concord is, well, that's old news. But I think the most interesting point of this conversation that does not come up in any other conversations other than on this channel, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that the one successful gas game that they had and continues to, you see 100,000 people. I mean, there are lots of players on Steam enjoying Helldivers 2. Game is still selling. It's getting content. Now, how many people on PlayStation are playing? I honestly don't have those numbers in front of me. But the interesting part, or should I say, the more concerning part of this conversation, is the fact that the team behind that game, Arrowhead Studios, is not only going to fund their own game, but they are going to probably make that game multi-plat. Why is that? Well, because Sony messed up. Sony lost them a lot of money. And what happened was it not last week, the week before, we talked about it. The head of the studio basically says when you 100% fund your own game, you can 100% make the decisions on that said game. So that, and again, maybe that's not a big deal for you, but that is definitely a shot at the over the bow with Sony. That there's no doubt about it. That is a hey, and you know something, like I said, if you don't believe me, read the presser. Right after they said that, oh no, we're still good. We want to work with Sony. Sure you do. As a third party. Because I'm sure, I'm absolutely sure that they could have made more money if that game was on Xbox, even if it was a 6-month or a year delay. Like, give all the PlayStation players time to run around with this giant W banner. Hey, we got Helldivers. I bought Helldivers. I bought DLC for it. It's a freaking great game. My brother didn't like it, but I loved it. Fuzzy. Again, this is one of those conversations that's going to be ongoing until we see what happens with PlayStation. I think there's going to be a lot of moving parts in the next 6 months to a year, and it can't be just we sold more consoles. I think if you keep running that narrative, folks, you're doing it all wrong. Console sales are important. They're no longer the main draw of the conversation, and if you think that it is, then you need to get schooled on what makes money, because consoles do make money, but the truth of the matter is that software makes more, and that's the end of that conversation. But let me catch up on the super chats here, and I'm going to get into the final story of today's podcast, and it's an interesting one, folks. So we have here 3 super chats, 2 super chats and a channel member chat. Now, the first super chat of the day comes away of Sith Lord. He drops a very generous $2 super chat and says, 10 days until a fun week. Switch to Summer Games Fest, Xbox Showcase. Yeah, it's getting real, man. I'm going to be in LA with King David and Cognito and a whole bunch of other people. I'm going to be chilling with Web Dave is going to be there. Hargeet China is going to be there. Asante is going to be there as well. There's going to be a lot of people from the community there. Cannot wait to catch up with everybody. I'll be meeting Web Dave for the first time in real life. He's been a part of the show for many, many years. That's going to be great. So if you're going to be out in LA, folks, DM me and let me know so we can do a meet and greet sort of thing. But thanks so much for the generosity. As always, brother, we also have a $10 super chat. Comes the way of Gamer by Choice. He says this, boom. The world has shown us people do not get concerned until things are near total collapse. Sony and gaming's collapse being ignored. Is being ignored. Look at the number of studios closing and games failing. I mean, he's not wrong. Again, I don't know, Fuzzy, if we're going to see an 80s type of game collapse like it did, with the Atari, ColecoVision, and the rest of the stuff, because obviously gaming was big, but it's not like it is now. I don't know about a collapse. I think what you're going to see from the consumer populace is a wait and see kind of a thing. I don't think people are going to be racing to spend $80. I think people are going to do what good consumers do, right? We're going to wait for a sale. We're going to try and find it digitally somewhere. I know there's people like, I want to buy my games. I get all of that, but if you can buy the physical game for $80, you can get the digital one for $40. I don't know if you're buying the physical one, folks. I'd be honest with you, but again, we will certainly see. We have here Nino Vistic. Not only has he gifted 1 Double Barrel Gaming membership, which of course, thank you so much for the generosity, as he does almost every show. He has also been a channel member himself for 19 months. And he says this, mahalo, Mrs. and Mr. BoomStick, on the best community on YouTube. Well, that's very kind of you to say, brother. Aloha to you and yours. He says, panel is always fire. Chat is next level. Aloha to all gamers. Sony should put first-party day and date on PlayStation Plus, Xbox, and PC. Yeah, I mean, they'll never do that, but I can tell you this. Again, this is just, a shot in the dark. If they ever offered their premium tier, meaning PlayStation Plus Premium, which is about $180 after tax, right? If they offered day and date in there, their sub count would go through the roof. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I don't know when or if they'll ever do that. I mean, again, they don't even support a game that's selling for them in Gran Turismo by making sure that the maps are done right and everything, right? So, it's just, I don't know what's going on with PlayStation. I put it to this way. They're just not the same PlayStation they used to be. They used to be the pulse of the gaming conversation, 4 or 5 years ago. They're just not the same corporation. Why is that? Folks, your guess is as good as mine. But Fuzzy, I want to move us over. Oh, wait a second. We have another a channel member chat here from Jay Rambert. So Jay, thank you so much for being here as always. And thank you for supporting the channel for the last 6 months, folks. He says this: Sony hasn't released bangers in a while. So I'll bet that if they put other games on Xbox in about a year. I mean, here's the thing, folks. How long do you think it's going to take Sony's brass, meaning Hiroki Totoki? And by the way, I got the name of the president. It is the current president of the CEO and CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment behind PlayStation is Hideaki Nishino. And he was appointed to this role on April 1st of 2025. Herman Hulst continues to serve as the CEO of Studio Business Group, which says demotion to me. But again, that's here for another story. But here's the thing. How long, ladies and gentlemen, I ask this question again. Do you think it's going to take Sony to see that 5 of the top 7 most paid for games on their service are Microsoft-owned games before they make their own move? I know people are like, oh, but they're getting a free 30%. It's not free. That's number one. So don't say, when people say that, you don't sound too intelligent. It's not free. They are allowing someone to put their game on their service, and that is the fee. It's a standardized fee. It's 30%. Yes, they're making money from Xbox putting their games on there. And any DLC, they get 30% of as well. So if someone goes and buys DLC for Sea of Thieves or any of their games, they're getting 30%. But wouldn't Sony want to potentially have 100% of the profit, meaning that they'd make their own games, right? That makes sense. And would it be better for Sony to take something like, let's say, for instance, Days Gone, right? Days Gone is a fantastic game. It's literally sitting on a digital shelf doing nothing. It came out for PC. Their Game of the Year edition. Did anyone buy it? I don't know. I didn't buy it because I don't play on PC, but maybe a lot of PC players bought it. If that game were to release on Xbox, how many copies would sell? You think 1 million? Maybe 2 million? Maybe 5 million? I don't know. But it would be millions of sold copies to help fund PlayStation's next first-party game. Maybe the sequel, right? I don't know. This is the conversation that's going to rage on. Sony is very traditional, and they're also very stubborn. So if they want to make money like Xbox, they'll put their games onto PC and eventually on Xbox. If they don't want to make money, then they can keep doing what they're doing. And how's that working out for them, Fuzzy Belvedere? Really not so good, right? So, Jay, thank you so much for the support, brother. Let's get into this last topic. Now, this comes away of PureXbox.com. It was written by Ben Carey, posted on Saturday at noon. That's a very interesting question. I really want to get the chat involved with this one because, folks, look, whatever the next Xbox handheld is going to be, raise your hand in the chat, folks. Throw one in the chat if you're going to be there day one. If it's available for purchase upon its console, its big brother release of the console, I'm buying both. Right? I think most Xbox fans will. There's a rumor, thanks to Jez Corden of Windows Central, which we talked about last week, where this handheld is going to be dockable. So to me, what that again, I'm the spitballing here, folks. I really believe that this approach for next gen, which is expected in 2027, is an S Series X and S scenario. Right? You're going to have the big boy, $800. That's crazy to say. It's probably going to be around $700-800. I'm all in, right? Because I'm an Xbox guy. Then, of course, you're going to have the S version of that in the handheld, which is dockable. Now, what is the dockable thing going to do? I have no idea. Now, if I was Xbox, I'd put some electronics into that dock to make it, boost the visuals, which I think they could do. Like, I really think that they could logistically sell a combo. You get the dock, you get the console, or you sell the dock separately. Dock separately, $100, $150, whatever it is. If you want to play dock, you can. Here's your Series S. I think that's what they're going to do. That's not the conversation we're going to have, because that is a couple of years away. What we do have in front of us, ladies and gentlemen, is, again, a story from purexbox.com, and it asks an interesting question, which I want to pose to this chat right now. And, of course, I want to pose that to my co-host in Fuzzy Belvedere. And here is the talking point from Pure Xbox. Will you be buying the 2025 Xbox handheld from ASUS? And the answer is, from Mr. BoomStick XL, you're goddamn right I am, because you know what? It's going to be a dedicated Xbox handheld that is a third-party machine, and the quote-unquote official Xbox is minimum 2 years away. Right? You would like to believe and guess that November of 27 for the holiday, you'd get the new console, you get the new handheld. At that point, Xbox is hitting on all cylinders with their first party. They've announced all these new games. Everybody's going to want this new hardware. Why? Why do they want the new hardware? Because it's an open source box. You'll be able to play your Steam. You'll be able to play your good old games, your Epic library that you get for free. Probably your entire Epic library is all free games. Don't lie, because it's exactly what I do. And I know Fuzzy does that as well. If it's free, it's for me, right? Or if it's free, I'll take 3, right? That's the running rumor. So, but this thing should have been announced already, and it hasn't. Now, it is slated to release this year, right? That is the running rumor. We all thought it was going to be at GDC. It wasn't there. And a lot of moving and shaking has happened due to tariffs. And I know people are, boom, tariffs again. Yeah, folks, I get it. You don't want to talk about real life politics. Politics smells and it stinks, right? But that's probably why we haven't seen it yet. So my question to you, Fuzzy Belvedere, is someone who has a rig. You have a PC. You prefer to game on Xbox. You have a PlayStation 5. You enjoy that as well. I have a ROG Ally. I have an old launch one. So it's got some years on it. It's not the follow-up, and certainly not the 2, because the 2 isn't out yet. But I am buying this. Why? Because I like simplistic gaming. And if this thing is set up to be like an Xbox, where I can go and play what you're seeing on your screen right now on handheld. I'm sitting on the couch, Mrs. Boom and I are checking out the newest K-drama, and I kind of just want to play Vampire Survivors, which is my favorite game to sit on the couch and play. Whether I play it on the Switch, I actually use the PlayStation Portal to use that on my PlayStation when we're just sitting there, because it's just moving a stick. Sound is off. I'm getting levels. It's great. It's awesome. And I will do that with this handheld, because it's going to be a PC, but a dedicated handheld for Xbox. That means it's going to have a load up screen that's similar to what you get with your current home console. That is exactly what I want. I'm not waiting 2 years. Chat, let me go to the chat here and find out, folks. Throw a 1 into the chat if you yourself will be buying the ROG Ally Xbox console or portable in the coming months, because I would imagine that this could be a big announcement at the showcase, maybe. I mean, it sounds like it now. No, Rock is usually really good on doing their own events.
Mhm.
It makes sense, right? You do your own Xbox event. It's 28 minutes. You talk about the specs, you talk about the chips, you talk about how much it's going to cost. You get Phil Spencer to come up on stage and be like, "Yep, until we get, here we go. We've teamed up with ASUS or ASUS to release this console. It's going to cost this. It's releasing it." But Fuzzy Belvedere, there is a showcase in 10 days that does kind of kick the door wide open to, hey, you want to sell this thing, and this is a big partnership with ROG. There's no doubt about it. Where are most of the eyes going to be? And here's the other thing. I know this sounds crazy, folks. There's going to be a lot of PlayStation gamers watching this show. As a matter of fact, I've already been told by several of the trolls of the interwebs who remain nameless on this podcast that is really a PlayStation show because all those games are going to Xbox.
Oh,
and
the second secret showcase.
It's the actual it is a secret PlayStation showcase that is masked as an Xbox One. Who knew? But needless to say, there's going to be a lot of PlayStation gamers. Now, check this out, folks. The Xbox Game Pass, like we talked about in the opening of the show, undeniable. The value is unfreaking deniable. So, if you are someone who has a PlayStation 5, you're like, I don't really want to buy an Xbox, but I like ROG. I have one. My brother has one. My best friend has one. I like it. I'm kind of okay with PC, but I just kind of like a handheld. Maybe this is the thing that gets them into the door. Because if they could get this console, this handheld console, and they take their gaming on the go, and their PlayStation library is still where it is. They have their 100 games. They have their trophies. They have their friends list. Nothing has changed. But they can also dabble in Xbox and then get Xbox Game Pass to go with this handheld. I think that's a winner-winner chicken dinner. Let's get your thoughts on whether or not only are you buying the ROG Ally Xbox device, where do you think it's going to show up?
That's been a tough one. And I hate talking about tariffs, but my original thought was that this would be a $600 device pre-tariffs. Like that was, I think, the goal that they were shooting for. Like maybe the lower spec one, a higher spec one would be closer to 800, 900. But that upper spec one would be the equivalent of a ROG Ally X2, basically. It would be on par with like a Steam Deck 2, which I have well, hopefully this will show my Steam Deck here. I'm looking to replace this at some point, and the goal is either a Steam Deck 2 or an Xbox handheld that will be able to play their PC titles and possibly some of the console titles. Now, this is kind of the sticking point, and I hope that they show this. There are a handful of like launch Xbox One games that were first party that are not on the PC store. There are also some partnered second party ones that are not on the PC store for dual entitlement or being able to play those there. Like Dead Rising 3, I think, is one of them. Rise Son of Rome is another. There's a couple of other smaller ones that aren't there, that if this device is able to play my console version of those on there, oh, hands down, it's a day one buy. Otherwise, I might have to wait for the Xbox handheld in 27, which I don't really want to wait that long, because by that point, I probably will pick up a Steam Deck too. But I think the biggest thing that this device is going to be is that blend that we've been hearing rumors of, where you can play Steam games on an Xbox. My gut is that you'll be able to have the access to your Steam library on this device without having to do the console streaming aspect of it. So that's probably the key thing. If I can play Rise Son of Rome or Dead Rising 3 that I own, I think both physically and digitally on this device, yeah, it's absolutely a day one buy for me. That would cover a lot of my Xbox One library that isn't also on PC. Yep. But even if it doesn't have that access to those games, having something where you can access Game Pass and download the games natively to that device, I think would be huge, because that way you don't have to rely on streaming. And at that point, it's essentially like a console at that point. You can play in offline mode or what have you. But my suggestion would be to play online, only because that way your cross save and cross progression would work. So when you're not on that handheld, your saves carry over to your console or over to your PC or wherever you're playing. So hopefully tariffs don't beat this thing up too much. We'll see. I think that's possibly why it hasn't been, fully released or announced, because tariffs were on and then they were paused, and that's only for so many days. And
I think 90 days was what they said, and that's not enough to change the course of anything at this point.
Yeah, so hopefully there's some negotiations done by that time the 90 days comes up. We'll see. But if that is the case, hopefully this thing is still in the $600 or $700 range for the lower spec one. Upper spec, expect 800 plus. But if you go with the 800 plus, I would say that's going to probably be the best device to play PC games and console games handheld for probably the next couple of years. So that would be like, if you're looking to progressively do upgrades, by the time the true Xbox made handheld comes out, then that would be the device to own. But if you're new to the whole PC handheld, if they do have a lower spec one that is in the $600 range, I would say it's a well worth purchase. Like, keep in mind, when this Steam Deck came out, it was $650 at launch for the 512. I would expect that, like, that same one now you could probably find for $350. So it dropped $300 in price over the period of time. But something like the lower spec one will still be able to play your Xbox games, have access to Game Pass natively, and have access more than likely to Steam games. You may have to sideload them. I think the UI will have an easier integration, so you can log into Steam or have the Steam app on that device, and any Steam games you own, you'll have access to play natively. And then the same thing with the Epic Game Store, which I'm hoping Epic is for putting themselves on this device, because especially a lot of us that have downloaded those or added the free games to their library, you might have like 30 plus games right off the rip. They have Sifu, I think, is free right now, and I forget the other games that are
well,
free.
No, believe it or not, the game that just released is there. Deliver at All Costs. Was free. So, I bought that game. By the way, folks, it's awesome. If you like the GTA style, go download that game for free.
Yeah. So having this device, this handheld device, I know some people might not want to play it or play on PC, or they don't necessarily need a handheld device. But keep in mind, these things are easily to put, even if you just buy like an Amazon dock or a dock off of Amazon for like $20, although it's better to spend between the 40 and 60 range. And I think even the Steam Deck dock was like $80. You can hook those to, you can hook those to a monitor. You can hook it to your TV. If you have the VR or AR glasses, which I know a handful of people use those instead, you can have your AR glasses. So now you can turn that little 8-inch screen into a 100-inch screen kind of thing floating in front of you. This is a nice alternative to buying a PC. If you don't want to spend $1,500 plus on a PC and you just want to kind of dip your toe into what it's like having that Xbox UI on a PC, that would be the way to go. Hook it to your TV. You can play with a mouse and keyboard on some games, or just play with your controller, and you'll be able to, more than likely connect that via Bluetooth, pretty seamlessly. So I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning more towards definite day one buy. But I want to hear how many of the Xbox One games will be able to play natively. If they are all able to play natively and they got the third party publishers to hop on board on this, I don't know how else to express it. This would be the best device to buy over buying like a Series S or even a Series X at that point, unless you absolutely have no desire to game when you're away somewhere. Like, I go on to conventions every now and then with the wife for horror conventions and stuff. Having the downtime at the hotel when we're not watching, like, let's say Netflix, or we're just chilling and relaxing kind of thing, there are times where it's like, oh, I can break out the Steam Deck and play it. Having something like that is pretty cool to have. Or if you take your car for an oil change, you don't do it yourself anymore type of thing, and you're waiting in the lobby, it might be more than a half hour to an hour before they, get you out of there. It's a good way to kind of have, time to kill, play a few games while you wait. And by the time your car's ready, put it in the carrying case and carry it back home kind of thing. But
Yeah.
for me, it's a go-to for downtime if I'm waiting in a long line or have a long wait for something. Portables are definitely a I wouldn't say they're the gaming device to have, but it's grown on me. And I was totally not a portable device person before the Steam Deck came out, and I was like, I'll give it a try, and I've been hooked ever since. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to what they have on this Xbox ROG Ally thing. So we'll see.
So I want to flip the coin, and I want to ask you another question. Chat, do you think that this is a big enough of announcement to show up at the June showcase happening in just a pinch over a week? And I think it is. I actually think that again, ROG is really notorious for doing their own events, and they do it up well, right? Everyone tunes in, they turn out. It's a big conversation in the games community. But I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm Xbox, I might take 15 minutes to kind of make this a thing, right? Now, we don't know how many games they're going to show. We've heard the running rumors. You've heard me talk about this, and I'm not the only one that have said this before. There are a lot of people in the Xbox community talking about how this is expected to be an even bigger show than last year. But I still think that, like, for instance, where does this better suit this device? Showing up at the Keeleys for 3 minutes and then like, hey, so Keeley, because I know exactly what's going to happen. If this does show up at the Keeleys, it's going to be like, hey, everyone, here's the Xbox ASUS, thing. And it's going to be a trailer. And then something Sony's going to come up and he's going to be like, yeah, Sony, let's go. Right. That's how he's going to be. Don't do that. If you're honestly, you want this thing to sell, it's a legit partnership with ROG. Put this in your own showcase because everybody's going to be watching it. And when I say everybody, folks, I am not joshing you. There are going to be a lot of Sony mains, and I'm not talking about the trolls, folks. And you know what? Apologies in advance for the poor Sony people that are just gamers. Like, they get roped into this troll community. Not everybody is like that. We have many people in this chat right now who are just gamers, and their main is Sony. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. We're not talking about the trolls who use console war rhetoric to sell their brand. We're talking about gamers that only buy one console a generation, and for the last couple of generations since the Xbox 360, it has been the PS4 and the PS5, maybe even the PS5 Pro, because that is where they play. Doesn't make them a troll, doesn't make them a noob, doesn't make them not worthy of a conversation. It's just they're gamers. So they're going to be watching this show. And like I said, am I overstating the fact that a potential $800 device is going to be in the wheelhouse of the casuals? Well, it's not. It's going to be for the hardcore for sure. But if there is a PlayStation gamer who doesn't want to get an Xbox, and this thing does come out for $600, maybe the tariff situation works its way out, Fuzzy. Maybe it is a $600 device. Someone that likes portable gaming and is going to be able to take advantage of Xbox Game Pass might want to buy this device. Do you think this shows up at the event?
I hope so. Like, I think basically because there's going to be a lot of PlayStation players watching it to see what might potentially come over. I know they keep on saying whole slate, but it seems like the timing doesn't necessarily match what they're saying at this point. But in the grand scheme of things, I think having it at the June showcase, even if it's just a 5 to 10 minute, showing what games can play, like your existing library or a PC library or access to Steam, if they can get that point across, I think that will be all that they need to really show at that point. And then maybe have like a deeper dive. Maybe ROG or ASUS has a deeper dive after the fact on, like, for the future game show. Yes. Or the PC game show stuff, since that it's technically more of a PC console or PC handheld. Maybe they go into more depth there. But I think having it at the showcase, showing the new UI, showing how seamless it is to access your library and be able to play games on the go and sync your saves and everything. Yeah, I really hope they show it at the showcase, because at that point then there will be the rush on how do you pre-order it, whether you pre-order it at Best Buy or pre-order it direct from ASUS or directly from Microsoft, whatever the case may be. I've had more luck buying things direct from Microsoft for the most part, but yeah, I really hope they show it at the showcase, because it will bring their whole plan of Xbox everywhere more to the forefront, and showing this type of device where you can literally do that and hook it to a TV or monitor, or just take it on the road trips and stuff like that. So let's hope.
Yeah, I mean, again, it doesn't have to be a half an hour event. It could, and I think you're onto something, because there is the Future Game Show, which is that weekend. That between Friday and Sunday, I think there's a total of 6 shows.
Yeah.
Right? They have the PC Game Show. They have the Future Game Showcase. They also have the supposedly now, right after the Switch launch, there's a rumor that VGC did an article for where there's going to be a Switch 2 Direct. I would not be surprised if they show the new Mario there. Like, that makes perfect sense. And it's going to be in, my God, folks, in the same block. Like, again, where I'm going to be boots on ground, but I'm bringing all of my equipment. I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I will be doing a couple of live streams. And soon, I believe I'm going to be able to have a live stream right after the showcase. I'll go live from the hotel room and we'll talk about it. But I'm going to be covering everything that's happening. And I think that you could see this at the PC Game Show. Makes sense. But I do think that there's something to be said about maybe doing a dual reveal, right? Because you're going to have a subset of audience that's going to tune in for the PC Game Showcase and the one of the other ones. But there's a lot of people that are going to be tuning in to the Xbox Showcase. And again, I don't think it's only Xbox people. I really think there is going to be a large PlayStation community that tunes in to see what games that Xbox is going to announce, that is not only releasing, whether it be timed exclusive or not, that will be eventually coming to their system of choice, and that's PlayStation. And I think that that's why I think Phil Spencer specifically said that they're going to be completely, forward-facing and earnest with what is going where. So again, a lot of purists in the Xbox community are not going to like this, Fuzzy, but at the end of each one of these trailers, it's going to say Switch 2, PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox Game Pass. That's going to piss off a lot of people, and there's going to be even more people running away from the brand. Oh, okay, listen, I'm not here to argue with you if you're that disenchanted with it. You know what? You know how to spend your money. But that is ultimately what's going to happen. And I think because of that announcement, he said that early in the year, kind of getting people ready for it. I think that this would be a great opportunity to show off this handheld and get people excited to potentially buy it. And again, we don't know what the price is going to be. It could be upwards of $800, which is a lot. I'm still getting it, but that's still a lot of money in the norms, and definitely not buying an $800 handheld. That is for sure. But again, value proposition, the strength of Xbox Game Pass through its first party, through its third party, second party, and indies in the service, as well as the roadmap for Xbox gamers and potential new customers. It's super strong right now. Xbox is hitting on all cylinders. But Fuzzy Belvedere, let me just catch up on Super Chats and we'll get everyone out of here. We have another member chat from Dragon Wolf, who's been a channel member for, 16 long months. So Dragon Wolf, thank you so much for the continued support. Mrs. Boom and I truly appreciate it. He says Sony doesn't make enough games to go day and date. In the service, it would not be worth it until they increase their first-party output. Well, that's something that is going to take a long time. They made a drastic change, Dragon Wolf, from their first-party bangers to this 12 gas games, which 10 of the 12 have been canceled, one of which is almost on its way to be canceled, and that potentially could be Fair Games. And Marathon seems like it's going to be delayed. So they have to switch And it takes you got to understand, folks, when it's a company as big as Sony, it takes a lot to turn this behemoth. And they turned it from first party to gas. And when the gas wasn't working for them, they had to shift again. And in that shift was a lot of cancellations, which means, look, I'll put it to this way, and this is just spitballing. If you were to kind of round it off to how much money you think Sony has lost between Fair Games, Marathon, and Concord, I'm going to say, honestly, it's over $1 billion, Fuzzy. It's well over $1 billion in loss. Remember, these games are not out. These games are canceled, potentially canceled, and delayed. $1 billion of loss, folks. Microsoft could take that. Would they want to? Absolutely not. Can Sony take that? They're still a $1 billion corporation, but when you don't have the people buying the first party bangers and you don't have the gas games making the money, you can't take that kind of loss, folks. You just can't. But that's going to do it for us here. Fuzzy Belvedere, thank you so much for joining us. We had over 500 people here on a holiday, so of course, Mrs. Boom and I are very grateful for it. Again, folks, if you didn't know, if you're not, why would you watch the numbers? You don't have to, but I'm here to tell you that we are literally 15 subscribers away from 16,000. Holy cow, that is incredible. And that's thanks to the generosity of this incredible community that supports us through the views, and of course, more importantly, through the subs. And if you're not already subscribed and you enjoyed the banter that me and of course Fuzzy Belvedere did today, please consider subscribing before you get on out of here so we can get to that 16K before we fly. When I say me, fly out in June to cover all of the happenings in LA for the weekend of the, I think it's the 6th through the 8th, which is that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But Fuzzy Belvedere, we know we kind of pulled back on, trying to sell your brand as you're, attempting to help the missus grow hers. But folks, please, if you are a fan of, Fuzzy Belvedere, subscribe to his YouTube channel. It is the best place for anything and everything in the racing genre. And right now, well, there's a lot to get into, especially if you are a fan of Forza Horizon 5, because not only did it get a huge update, but it also launched on PS5. And of course, if you want some information on that, you can, tune in and subscribe to Fuzzy Belvedere. But his wife has an incredible horror-based podcast called Fright Night with her time every Friday when she's not starring in a movie, writing her own, or potentially traveling for all the horror cons. And obviously, it is a fun show, especially if you are into horror film. Sell the brand, brother. Where can people subscribe to both of your YouTube channels, but more importantly, follow you guys on social media?
Oh, as always, thank you for having me on. Always love doing this on Monday, whether it's breaking news or not, just talking about games and where the industry is going and all the stuff that's on the roadmap and days ahead right now when it comes to like the June showcase and stuff. Love talking about this stuff. Looking forward to everything that's coming this year as far as for gaming and even next year. But man, so much to look forward to. So many games to play. Definitely attack your backlog as best you can, because I think once we see the June showcase, it's going to stack up even more. But as always, you can find me on social media. Just do a search for Fuzzy Belvedere is where you can find me. Instagram, Twitter. I still call it Twitter, even though it's X, but as well as Blue Sky. I put my link in the chat for my YouTube. Also put the link in the chat for my wife's YouTube for Fright Night with Ferocious Fee. It's not going to be this Friday. I think it's June 6th is when we do our next show for the movie Drop, because we're going on a field trip, a camping field trip. Not horror related this time, just more so school stuff and being chaperone. But we got some more horror stuff coming up. But in the meantime, check out some of the previous podcast episodes where we talk about everything from Studio 666 to one of my favorites, Milk and Cereal, Milk and Cereal. It's a YouTube short, great hour-long YouTube short, low budget, independent film creator, awesome film. Definitely check it out. And there's a ton of other ones that we talk about, some of the classics and some of the more campy ones out there and stuff, but always a good time. Check out those movies, check out our feedback or our review and our banter back and forth as far as what we think of it. But always great to, interact with this chat. Love talking to you guys about gaming. I know that there's a few that are the strictest of PlayStation fans and don't want to see the writing on the wall. It's not that PlayStation's going away, but it is going to go through a metamorphosis with, first going to PC day and date. So be prepared. Might want to start changing your narrative now. But outside of that, just enjoy gaming. There's plenty to play out there. So hope to see you guys Friday. I will be able to make it Friday. We leave for the camping trip later in the afternoon. So hope to see you guys here right back in the chat for Breakfast with Boom, 10 a.m. Friday.
Awesome.
See you guys there.
Thank you. And real quick, we have 2 more gifted memberships from generous friends of the community. Gamer by Choice has gifted 1 Double Barrel Gaming membership, as well as Be Nice in the chat. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the generosity. We do greatly appreciate it. And you know what the narrative is going to be if PlayStation ever launches on Xbox? You see, PlayStation knows how to do business right. And they're going to get credit for doing it first, even though they did it last. It's fine. It's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in today. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast enough to give us a thumbs up. Of course, if you're feeling extra generous, you can share this on the socials and let people know about Double Barrel Gaming, more specifically the Xbox Factor podcast, the Xbox Lunch Break Special. We have multiple Xbox shows because, well, I'm an Xbox guy, but I have no problem giving credit where credit is due. The problem is right now, Sony is kind of dragging their heels, and I don't know what's going to happen to the brand outside of potentially some more delays, more studio closures, and potential loss of money. It'd be nice to actually talk about a game, and hopefully Ghost of Yotai doesn't get delayed. It does release this year, and it's a game that I'm going to very much enjoy playing because I love Ghost of Tsushima, and I have a feeling that this game is going to be as good. It's definitely as gorgeous as the as of Ghost of Tsushima, which you've seen from the from the previews. And Nintendo, man, I mean, their $80 game shocked the world, but the Nintendo Switch 2 is happening. And there is basically a confirmed direct for either the 5th or the 6th. And I have a feeling, Fuzzy, they're going to show off that new 3D Mario, and it's going to take the world's conversation by storm. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for all of the super chats, as well as the channel member chats. We super appreciate all the generosity. Of course, a big thank you to well over 500 people hanging out with us here today. On a holiday. And of course, I'm going to close the show with something that's incredibly important to me, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully one day be important to you. And that's something that my dad taught us when we were kids. And he would say, Craig, treat others how you want to be treated. And also, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. You live by those rules, son. I can guarantee you, you're going to have an awesome day. So take care, everyone. And we'll see you next week on the newest episode of the Xbox Lunch Break Special.